in the October. So See pictures posted every once in a while.
Now we got farmers. First, we don't have springers. So we got farmers right there. We always look that short.
This is kind of the way we dress. Thank God I ain't over there.
Hey, Steve, you're missing it.
I know it. I
Oh,
know
yeah,
it.
because it's always upside down. Like I always, every time we go.
I keep one in my bag. And got it before and could not find it. So I'm lost.
I think we'll go ahead and get started if everybody gets seated. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is a panel presentation on the Bridging Kentucky Design Build #1 panel discussion from some of the team members. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm Ed Green. I'm the communications manager for the Bridging Kentucky program. And then I'm going to let them all talk about, introduce themselves and talk about their role on the team. So we'll start with that.
My name's Adam Buckles. I work in the State Highway Engineer's office, and I am the project manager for the design build project.
My name's Heather Lawler. I work for Stantec and I'm the design manager.
Wes Hagerman with HDR. I got to be the structures lead for the design build team.
Jesse Frost, and I was the design manager for the design build team with HDR.
I'm Rob Harris with AECom. I'm the Bridge Kentucky project manager for the design build.
Okay, thank you all. As the title of this program kind of suggests, we're hoping to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned, some of the challenges we've encountered during this design build project. I think it's appropriate probably to start with Adam to talk a little bit about the project and how it came together. We're about 2 years into the project, so we can talk a little bit about how we got here.
Yes, certainly. So this project that we have is kind of carved out of the overall Bridge Kentucky program. And that program was set to replace or rehab deficient bridges all across the state, really. And as part of that program, I guess you could say some of the charter points, we were looking at trying to minimize any roadway work, minimize the approach work, and also as best we could minimize any kind of scope creep for these projects. What we began to find as we started letting some of these projects, whether it be a single project or a bundled project, as we started to see in eastern and southeastern Kentucky, we started to notice that there really weren't a whole lot of bidders. So less contractors, low bids as far as bid numbers, and then the bid costs were coming in really high. So as we started seeing those things, the cabinet looked at ways that we could maybe come up with a super bundle, you could say. So we carved out 106 bridges that were all in eastern Kentucky. They were all bridge replacement projects, so no rehabs or anything like that. And we hoped to bring in some more competition. So we hope to grab some competitors from maybe out of state, as well as some folks from the state of Kentucky. So we did that. We brought in a team that came from out of state, Kiewit, and we also had Hayden that went in with Palmer, And then we had Central Bridge BZAC that went in with HDR. So we selected Central Bridge BZAC team with HDR. And so this project is very widespread. It's over 21 counties across 3 highway districts. So it's really a large geographical area that we're dealing with. And these bridges that we're replacing are mostly county bridges. They're about 80% of the projects that we have, the bridges that we have in this project are county. So they're small bridges, most of them less than 70 feet long, but they really do have an impact in their communities. So sometimes, a lot of times these bridges are the last bridge that somebody might cross before they get to their house, their community. So it really impacts these communities quite a bit. So we wanted to ensure that we could get school buses to these communities, we could get commercial vehicles, garbage trucks, delivery trucks, and so forth. So, and that's really in a nutshell what this project is we've grabbed those bridges in this geographical area and trying to get those replaced as quick as we can.
Rob, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your perspective on this project. Obviously, design build is not something that's been heavily utilized as a delivery method in Kentucky. You've been part of 2 of the probably more prominent design build projects, the Ohio River Bridges project here in Louisville, and then obviously this project here for Bridging, Kentucky. Can you talk a little bit about how those are maybe similar and different, and how you're utilizing design build to deliver that?
Sure. Primary differences involve complexity and scale. The downtown Orb, we had very complex bridges, obviously a river crossing, complex maintenance of traffic, but in scale, it was very small, less than a square mile of area encompassed the project. The design build, as Adam alluded to, the bridges are very simple, one spanners, span length not very long, but the scale of the project is immense. The 3 districts, 21 counties, if you put a fence around all of the bridges in Google Earth, it comes out to about 6,000 square miles of land area. So they're very spread out. Similarities, Adam made a good point. Both the bridges in the downtown Orb, it's a vital north-south corridor, very, very crucial that we increase the capacity and keep that, and have a good route north and south. The bridges in the design build are equally important to the folks that those bridges serve. They may only be 3-4 houses, but that's their lifeline to the world. So that was a similarity. Glad Adam pointed that out. The other note, it's the delivery model was similar. We provide, or the owner provides a basic configuration, some parameters in the contract, and then we depend on the design build team utilizing their logistical expertise, their construction expertise, the design expertise, and deliver the project the fastest way possible in compliance with the contract. So similarities and differences.
Thank you. We talked about, we've got more than 100 bridges in this project. I think something everybody's always interested in is what kind of progress we're making about 2 years into the project, kind of where things stand. So I want to ask Jesse, from a design perspective, kind of what kind of progress we've made and how you were able to move quickly. And then obviously, Rob, if you could address the kind of construction progress.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So once we were going through the proposal phase of the project, we were looking at the bridges, and I think during the ITP, the Bridge to Kentucky program, they had probably about 40 of them had some design done. About 60 of those bridges with no design effort had been accomplished. So what we did is during the proposal phase, we worked with the contractor and laid out on those 60 bridges, laid out a type, size, and location of them, to give the contractor something to bid on, but also so we would have some, if we were awarded the contract, we would be able to hit the ground running with the design. So we were awarded the project, I think it's right around Halloween in 2019, and we started the design process in November of that year. There was in the ITP that identified about 20, 21 or 22 bridges that were high priority. Those bridges were either closed or near or very, had weight restrictions on them. So those ones, they had specific dates that they had to be open to traffic. So once we started the design, we jumped on those bridges first and hammered those out. And then initially we had 6 design squads with a couple different offices within HDR and then our Kentucky office working on this. And our goal was to jump out in front of the contractor, get the high priority bridges done, then jump out in front of them so that once the high priority bridges are over, they would have plans ready on the shelf that they could pull them off and schedule this more efficiently. And our goal was to complete the design within 12 to 14 months on the majority of the bridges. We were fortunate enough, even through COVID and everything, to be able to almost accomplish that. We had 1 or 2 bridges that went outside that time frame, but for the most part, we completed the design within about 13, 14 months. We submitted our last RFC, I think it was last week, we finally got it in. So now we are completely done with the design process. And as I said, the contractor now has remaining bridges that they can kind of look at their schedule and see if they can, get some more efficiencies in it. So.
Jesse, the construction side, out of the 106 bridges in the year and a half they've been working, they've touched about 48 of the bridges. And out of those 48, the department has accepted 15, so either they've been turned over to the state or county. We've got about 12 that are completed and or have been final inspected. So the remaining 21 still have some construction activities ongoing. Have quite a few that are open to traffic. I think Adam will touch on that later. In terms of money, the program is a little over $93 million total. And to date, they've earned about $39.6 million. That's 42% plus or minus. And then construction dollars, there's about $76 million of construction dollars, and that's mobilization, demobilization, actual construction monies. And they spent about 26 million of that, so that's right around 34%. So that's where we are in construction.
All right, thanks both of you. Heather, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your role. You talked in your introduction about your role as kind of a liaison for the cabinet. Can you talk a little bit about what is encompassed in that role, and then if we could have Adam talk about it from the owner's side, just kind of what benefit that's offered and how that's worked.
Yeah, so when the design build package was pulled out, obviously we had been, probably about a year into the design build. So we sort of had a setup anyway with the different discipline leads. So we took the 7 discipline leads that we had on the design bid build, the hydraulic, structured, roadway, environmental, utilities, and missing one. There's 7, right away, and pulled a discipline lead for each one of those. And so when they came to me and said, do you want to would you be the design manager? I was thinking, my background is roadway, a lot of interstate stuff. I don't know much about bridges, but the way the program is set up, I'm surrounded by these discipline leads, and then they have a support team. And so you really you don't need to design bridges to be in this role, thankfully for me. But my main role, and especially at the beginning, it's tapered off a little bit, like Jesse said, with the design you've got, is a liaison between the Bridging Kentucky team and KYTC, mostly Adam. I think, early on, I spent, most of my day just talking with Adam. And, we help support them. If an issue comes up, we usually present KYTC with some solutions, and then Adam, of course, has the final say on what goes on.
Yeah, from the cabinet perspective, I guess, we've got several design builds that are active across the state, and the GEC role varies between those. So for our project, we rely heavily on this GEC team, Bridge Kentucky team. Partly because there was that experience before our design build was active, their experience in the Bridge Kentucky program. overall. So they understood the processes and the you know, part of the charter and things that we were trying to do in Bridge, Kentucky. But it also allowed us to lessen the burden for the cabinet employees. So the review being held within the Bridge, Kentucky team, whether it be roadway, structural, environmental, what have you, that allowed our KYTC employees to not be burdened so much with that review. And that actually allowed us to easier, you know, it's easier for us to manage our 10-day review period. So our contract, we have, once the design build team submits something to us, we have a 10-day review period. So that being, you know, internal to our team, our Bridge Kentucky team and myself, that allowed us to, you know, much easier to manage that 10-day review time.
And Heather, just kind of as a follow-up, I wanted to ask you a little bit more. One of the goals, obviously, of the program was to build an efficiency. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the efficiencies that you use to deal with so many projects and so many parties involved.
Yeah, the design build team, we were fortunate that the design bid build was already well underway, and they could utilize a project management information system called eBuilder. We had a consultant on board very, very early on called KFA, and they helped build all the processes for that. So as soon as we got the ITP started, that was one of our first tasks, was to meet with them and build processes, because this was a different setup, because the non-design build was, it was all internal. With this, we had the DBT involved. So a lot of the processes were completely different. So we spent many months developing all those processes. We knew, most of us on the team knew how eBuilder worked. We just didn't know how to set up those processes. So we built all those from scratch. I think it was November. I think one of the first meetings we had with the DBT was to provide them training. Of course, they gave us input on some of the changes that they wanted. It probably took us another 6 months or so after construction, once construction got underway, to get those processes completed. And I think now we haven't really made any changes to the processes, and I think we've got some tweaks here and there, but that's how you manage. I mean, basically you have 106 projects. So that really the easy way is to put everything in eBuilder, and we kind of joke, it's like, if it's not an eBuilder, it didn't happen. So, but there's a record of everything. That's been the way.
Yeah. Adam, and I know in presentations like this, a lot of times we'll talk about unique projects, new concepts. A lot of people want to know about the challenges, things you have learned through the process. Maybe you could talk about, from a program perspective, some of the unique challenges of this project and kind of how you overcame those. Yeah,
I would think the number one challenge, I think, for our team and the DBT has been utility relocation. That certainly has, you know, with the number of sites that we have, we've talked about that, the geographic location of these being spread out over 21 counties. So, you know, anytime you're at a specific site, you're dealing with maybe an overhead, water line, gas, sewer, and that's amplified 106 times. So you're also dealing with all of those different entities that manage those programs and those engineering companies that service those. So quite a few utility folks that are needed to be coordinated with. And so with this contract, we put some of that burden onto the DBT. So they have a coordination piece to set up and write the utility agreements for all of these utility relocations. And then on the cabinet side, we paid 100% of those utility relocations. So they will submit a utility agreement to us, and then we'll review it. Some of our folks, Steve Farmer being one of them, he will review those utility agreements for us. And then we pay that at 100%. So that is one way that we've tried to help that along. We are paying 100% for utility relocations, trying to help that program to be successful to get those utilities moved. So that's the number one challenge. You know, geography is tough. You know, you can't very easily drive from one bridge to another. You have to backtrack from these haulers and go back out the way you came. So So that's been a challenge to us and to the DBT as well for material delivery, beam delivery. It's been a little bit challenging on their part, but they're really doing a good job with that. Another challenge that we've had has been agency coordination. Like I said before, we are in 3 districts, 21 counties. That's a lot of judge executives to speak with, 3 chief district engineers to coordinate with, as well as their PIO officers. So that coordination takes a lot of effort, and so we're lucky enough to have Ed Green and his team help us with those PI notifications, and they work with the districts to coordinate some of that. There's also district materials engineers, permits, encroachment permits that we have to coordinate with. So there's a lot of agency coordination there that goes along with this project. And then probably more recently, I guess, we're having trouble, and I think everybody's having trouble with just material supplies, especially in utilities, PVC, HDPE, those types of materials are hard to get right now. We're actually even seeing some steel reinforcement delays. The DBT mentioned the other day that they were 3 to 5 months out on a delivery for epoxy coated steel. So we're definitely seeing some of that, and they're trying to be proactive and order that material way ahead of time so that they'll have it. So overcome that.
Thanks, Ed. I did want to ask you also, kind of building on that theme of challenges and lessons learned. Jesse talked about some of the great progress we made on the design side, mission accomplished basically. But it was we struggled a little bit to get there. Talk about some of the challenges you found in design of this many structures.
Yeah, so when you first see that all these bridges are straight, short spans, it's definitely tempting to think that structural design would be simple, straightforward. I will admit there was no temptation to do a finite element model or any kind of refined analysis on these bridges, but when you get down in the trenches, there were some significant, those being just the lay of the land, the hilly terrain here, to constantly evaluate where is the top of bedrock likely to be. And of course, the geotechnical drillers went out there and did the best they could with the terrain out there. They can't get up close and personal to it. You just don't the contractor gets out there, starts excavating.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
So HDR was definitely on standby, design services during construction and ready to reevaluate, maybe take away a pre-drilling requirement for H-piles based on where the bedrock was actually proposed to be, maybe reanalyze a pier if it's going to be a few feet taller than it was originally proposed to be. We also have a lot of these state highways hug the edge of the creek, the edge of the river. And so when these county roads intersect, you might have a 20-foot tall breast wall abutment that's just a few feet away from the edge of a state highway or a US highway. So that's pretty challenging to rip that out and maintain traffic. So a lot of coordination with the contractor about constructability and trying to can't make the bridges easy to construct, but at least make them as easy as possible. Another challenge that comes to mind is just the fact that a lot of these county bridges were never designed to take the full Kentucky live load. So the beams, the superstructures are relatively shallow. So whereas the contract requires us to design for that full Kentucky live load. As a structural engineer, the simple thing to do is just make the beam deeper, make the superstructure thicker. But then, when I run that by my teammates, the hydraulics guys, like, you can't do that. You can't raise the grade 18 inches. Or, roadway guy, Jesse's yelling at me, you can't make the pavement tie-ins anymore. So, just always that challenge, just like that you all face with every project, just getting all the discipline leads at the table so we can communicate and just coordinate and put the best solution out there that satisfies every aspect of the design. Yeah, I'm definitely thankful for the KYTC Bridge Office and how they put together the standard box beam designs, some standard abutment designs and pier designs. Those are very helpful to us both early on, getting those preliminary concepts identified, estimating quantities, that kind of thing. But some of those designs and details even ended up in the final stamp plans as well. So
Excellent, Wes. I want to compliment you on your laser-like focus on the presentation while we had some distractions. Rob, I want to ask you a little bit again, build on that theme of challenges and what we learned from that. Talk a little bit about construction and some of the things you encountered through that phase.
Sure. Geography has been taking a big hit, but it's a reality here. Get back into the, deep in eastern Kentucky, you lose communication, we're all attached to our cell phones. So from the inspector side of it, they're on their own quite a bit. If they run into some kind of a problem or whatever, that, they may not be able to get a hold of the designer or any of us in Bridget, Kentucky to help them out. So, they're on their own and they have to be ready for that. And they've been very good at that. We also have multiple sites. We've got 8 or 9 bridge inspectors, and we have contractors that are working multiple sites. Now, fortunately, this year, like a K&K, they may have 3 or 4 bridges that are in close, quote unquote, close proximity, and they may have one bridge crew or bridge crew and a half. So that inspector can follow that bridge crew around, and it helps. But again, it's a tall order for our inspectors to have to keep up with 2 or 3 bridges at one time. Keeping up with the schedule. Schedules are always fluid, but 2020 COVID really hurt the schedule. They would give us a schedule on the 10th of the month, and by the 12th of the month, it was not any good anymore because either utility crews got COVID or construction crews were dealing with COVID, and our inspectors were geared up. We're ready to go to Bridge A. Well, now we're going to Bridge B because COVID or whatever. So that's been a big problem, and we thought we were behind that, but it's starting to rear its head again. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. Getting access, the inspectors getting access to the information they need. Heather mentioned eBuilder, which has been a real big help for the inspectors, for all of us, but the inspectors as well. We have a field office that's in London, Kentucky, so they can go to London, get access, Wi-Fi access, or if they can get access, somewhere else, either at their house or whatever, they can get all the information they need for whatever bridge they're going to be inspecting, special notes, plans themselves, and of course, they use Site Manager to log their DWR. So, eBuilder has been a big help, and we've got a centralized location for all of the information that they need to have access to. So, those are some of the challenges we've been dealing with.
Thanks, Rob. Jessica, this next one's for you. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about utilities, obviously a critical path item that we've mentioned a couple of times today. Tell us a little bit about what that process has been like in this project and what you've learned through that.
Yeah, just like Rob and Adam both have alluded to, we're dealing with 21 different counties, multiple municipalities, different utility companies, just all spread out. So that's definitely been a challenge for the coordination side, which BizAc, they had hired on, a utility coordinator full-time to help spearhead all that, which was definitely a big help, and they jumped on it in the early beginnings. Unfortunately, as Rob mentioned too, COVID, it was a lot of times, you want to meet on site with utility companies just to determine where the utilities either were or where we could relocate them to. And, with COVID, a lot of them they would not, just their company policy or whatever, they could not meet out in the field. So that was definitely a challenge early on. Also just determining where the utilities are. If you look at, we had some pictures up, we could show you, there was a lot of these bridges that had gas lines and water lines attached to it. And of course, the overheads, we know where those are, but if they're not attached to the bridge, and a lot of times it was just very difficult knowing where they were. You would get, sometimes a municipality would say it was over here, but then their engineer would say it was over here. And, you know, we would have to go out and dig it up just to find where it was. And sometimes we'd start construction and find it then, unfortunately. So it's definitely been a challenge with getting all that together. And as far as scheduling, you know, one good thing now is we are through with the design. So now the contractor, as Rob said too, the schedule's still a little bit in flux. You know, they're scheduled to start a bridge in a couple of weeks, but the utilities are still not clear. Then they can luckily have another set of plans they can pull off the shelf and maybe move to a different location or something. So that's been a big help to the contractor. And also with, as Adam mentioned, materials. You know, right now, I know the contractors are having a lot of issues getting materials, specifically on the water side for water line relocation. So that's definitely been an impact as well. And, you know, so hopefully, you know, things get cleared up and they can, all this can keep moving forwards.
Heather, we didn't have room at the table for another lead, and for our environmental team as it represents, so you drew the short straw. Get to talk a little bit about some of the challenges of environmental, how you handle that.
I know, and Tom was in our last session, I think, or this session. Yeah, so just like, you know, I think Wes had mentioned, or Jesse, the bridges, a lot of them were underway. I think we, you know, 30, 40 bridges that we had already done some work on, and environmental may have looked at all the bridges. So it was determined early on that the bridging protected team, KYTC, would provide the DBT with the environmental clear area. And then the ITP was written that if the DBT wanted to get additional environmentally cleared areas, they would have to do it on. There was a whole section on how they needed to do it and everything. But then I think once the first bridge came, we might even had two kind of early on, and we kind of stepped back and said, maybe this isn't such a good idea. We can maybe improve the efficiency if we would just let our group that already had relationships with the approving agencies to go ahead and do it. So that's what we've done since. And a lot of the, I know Tom Springer was in an earlier session saying we had lots and lots of additional ECA requests, but most of them were sometimes we just needed to provide additional, like maybe a portion of the roadway was missing. So it just got left off of the additional analysis. So we did have a lot, but the actual bridges that the DBT requested additional, that we had to do additional work for, was, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen or so,
Yeah.
something like that. And then a negative contract order change order was put in for that to pay for that. And so that's how we managed the additional environmental. And of course, you know, with these bridges, just like utilities, every bridge has something special. Some have special use water, some have, you know, storage structures. I think we got a couple of some storage structures. So, you know, it seems like there's 106 issues on 106 bridges.
And thanks, Heather. I appreciate you taking that. Adam, you know, we talked about, again, this presentations on lessons learned. I think it's something, anytime we do something innovative where we're trying to build efficiencies, what we hope to get is something we can take back to use in an ongoing way. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what types of things from this project did we learn that we might be able to incorporate in other KYTC projects?
Certainly with any design build project, you're looking at some of the innovations that come out of the process. And I think for this, you know, the program itself, the Bridge Kentucky program itself, where we have a, you know, limited scope and a really defined scope. We're not, you know, doing a lot of approach work or roadway work. We're really just targeting those deficient structures. I think that's a very good thing that Cabinet can use moving forward. And like Wes said, you know, the KYTC standard bridge drawings, you know, we've leaned pretty heavy on those. And that's something that's been utilized quite a bit, and a very good thing that, you know, the Cabinet was doing already, but we've been able to utilize that for our project. On the construction side, we do have one subcontractor, JK Contracting. They have done something just a little different. They actually have a fabrication shop there at their location in London, Kentucky, and they are able to pre-tie their steel and actually form and create their forms, build their forms in their shop. So they're, you know, out of the weather, they're out of the mud, the rain, the sun, and they're able to do that beforehand, and then they will load that setup onto onto a truck and deliver it to site actually as they need it. So that's been beneficial for them. And so in a lot of cases that, so far this year with K&K, they've been able to begin excavation, dry piling. They'll set these forms in place and then pour their invent cap all in one day. And in a lot of cases, they've done both invents in one day. So that's a really fast pace. And so what that's allowed them to do is to take maybe 1.5 crews and start over a course of maybe 2 weeks, start say 4 bridges. And so that's all staggered along, but just because they can preform those and pre-tie that steel ahead of time. So that's been a pretty neat innovation that we've seen for this project. And going back to the scope, the limited scope and the narrow scope, I think we had that pretty well defined in the ITP going in, what we were expecting. So I think our team did a good job of developing that ITP, but also we, and most of the design builds do this, we had a series of one-on-one meetings with the DBTs. And so we were able to get some of that conversation going about maybe something that we didn't have clarified correctly or maybe misclarified, unclear in the ITP. And so we were able to go on, I think, a 2-week basis and do an update to the ITP. So any questions they had, we were able to revise, maybe clarify a little bit better. And that's been a really good advantage for us, so that not only KYTC, but also the DBT is pretty clear on what we're expecting for the project. And that's really helped us almost eliminate change orders. We've had just a couple of change orders, but very, very small amount. So it's been very successful.
Well, great. I did want to finish up. I think we get towards the end of the presentation. The question is, what's next for the project? 2 years in with some work ahead.
Yeah, so we, just like Ed said, we're 2 years in. We've been constructing for about 18 months out of that 2 years. And Rob mentioned before, we've began 48 of our 106, 48 bridges of our 106. And 36 of those are actually open to traffic now. So we're moving along pretty well. We've had 27 or 28 new starts this year, as opposed to 20. I think we had 20 starts in 2020. So the pace has picked up for sure this year. And I think the DBT has planned maybe 10, 12 new starts for the remainder of the year. So that's going to put us around 40 bridges for this year. And so we should be well over half with 2 years remaining. So that's a good indication that we're going to finish ahead of schedule, and at the worst we'll finish on time.
Thanks a lot. Well, they've let me ask all the questions. I do want to open it up for others to ask some questions. It looks like we got about 4 or 5 minutes left, so I want to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have a question?
Question. Of the 106, how many were rehab and how many were replacement?
So initially, all of these 106 were replacements. We did modify one bridge and actually converted it to a rehab, but just the one. So all the others are replacements.
Just as a follow-up to that, I think the original program, I think, was 1,000 rehab or replacement, and the original was for the design build. What's the status of the remaining that are not in the design build? Is there an update? I don't know, Heather, you about that?
We don't have an update on that. That's a discussion that would have to be taken up with the state highway engineer.
Thank you.
Did you want to know what the progress of the overall program was?
Yeah, I mean,
overall, they've reopened more than 300 bridges that have been completed. I don't have the firm number, but I know it's somewhere around 450 that have had design done. Any other questions? I'll let you all off the hook a couple minutes early. Thanks a lot.
So what it- So he's supposed to be, but I'm gonna wait to make sure.